Before we dive into this episode, I just want to let you know if you want to get access to episodes before anybody else, head on over to patreon.com/concerts that made us. And as a bonus, you'll get access to videos of some of the episodes and a host of other benefits. We've also teamed up with Band Builder Academy to offer you 10% off their membership. Details of both can be found in the show notes below.
Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The show is about to begin.
Welcome to the podcast, concerts that made us, interviews and stories, tales from the bus. We love taking you back to when it all went down, the greatest live shows and the cheering crowd sound. It's concerts that made us, concertsthatmadeus.com.
Hey guys, I've got a really special episode for you right here. I'm joined by Joy Pereira. Joy is the founder and chief creator at Joy Pereira Creative, creating live shows on digital platforms and producing conversations on her podcast, Nerds of Joy, where she interviews entrepreneurs, creatives, and industry experts. But another side to Joy is she has over 20 years' experience as the stage manager of Sydney Opera House. And if you're a regular listener to the show, you know that's the side of the business we don't get to look at too often. Words actually can't describe how much I enjoyed the conversation with Joy, and I know you're going to love it too. So, let's jump right into it. Joy, you're very welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Brian.
I'm actually delighted to have you now. This is a side of the industry we don't get to talk to too much on the show now, so I'm excited to hear your stories and see that side of the business.
There's a lot behind the scenes or side of stage that people I think might not be aware of, but I think if you're a music lover, then it's really good to explore what goes on the other side.
Yeah, definitely. So you've been the stage manager of Sydney Opera House for 20 years. But before we get into that, we'll start at the very beginning. Now, if you can you remember your very earliest musical memory?
Gosh, my parents weren't that musical, but I do remember memories of being in the back of a Volvo and sliding around on the plastic type leather seats. I don't think they were leather or plastic. And getting a pencil and like rewinding the tape to a song. I think it could have been Barry Manilow. That's maybe what they were into. We were listening to it. But rewinding that tape, and everyone had to take a turn to rewind the tape.
Right. It's that just reminded me of that meme that you often see on Facebook now with the pencil and the tape, and it's like, you're old if you know what this is.
Oh, God.
I'm not calling you old, of course, now. And
that's okay.
at what point then did you realize that you wanted to work in the entertainment/music industry?
Well, I think I was always a kid that was really into film and TV, and I was really fascinated with how that kind of was all put together. And I was actually quite a shy and demure kid at school, but there was always this kind of like show quality that I was really interested in. It was probably coming from like Looney Tunes and all of those kind of shows that you'd see, like the Barber of Seville, and you'd see Bugs Bunny doing his thing. And I think it stemmed from that. I just really loved the different aspects of music, and, I played the piano, or I was going to piano lessons. So that was probably the only musical education as such that I had as a kid. And it was certainly the only extracurricular thing that I did as well. But by no means am I a virtuoso on the piano or anything.
And did you ever, consider going into the performance side of it?
I did actually. That's probably where I first got my start, meaning that I, although shy at school, didn't really, especially primary school, very, very shy little one, I had this sort of thing where I'd come alive when I'd have to do like little skits or little performances within the classroom. And I think it was probably getting towards year 10, which, like, we go up to year 12 here in Australia. And I suddenly went, I kind of want to act, not to be famous. And it wasn't, it's not saturated like it is these days where everyone gets on a phone and they do their thing and lots of people want to be famous. It was just purely, I think, like it was a craft as well. And so I used to do drama on a Saturday outside of school, and then we'd be cast in like as extras and things on Home and Away, if you know that show, if that's made it to things. So like you'd be in the background banging the lockers and all of that. And I just had this real interest by doing that to see how there were so many other roles. It wasn't just acting, but there was also all of the technical people, the directors, the cameras, everything. So it was all fascinating to me, and that was probably a really good kickstart before I finished school as such.
Yeah. It's actually funny you mentioned Home and Away, because over in Ireland, that's like when anybody thinks of Australia, they think of Home and Away. It's been on TV over here, I'd say, for as long as it's been on in Australia. And I knew you were from Australia, and in the back of my head, I was like, don't mention Home and Away. Don't mention Home and Away.
I'm open to it. No, it's changed. It's very much changed over the years. I haven't watched an episode for many, but in the early days, that's what everyone watched,
Yeah. I still remember, do you remember Shane and Angel in it years ago? Yeah, that's when I used to watch it.
Got you. And I used to actually do acting classes with Shane.
Really?
With the actor before he got the role. And then, very sad story about him as well, Dieter Brummer, but really fun, lovely guy. So, I did watch it in those times, and RIP for him.
Yeah, exactly. And how did you get into working at Sydney Opera House then? How did you become the stage manager?
Well, it was very interesting because it was always film and television, or it was going to be theatre, and I didn't know which one. And I decided to apply to different universities before school finished, and had to audition and whatnot, and then decided very fickily that I wanted to go to this particular uni because it was by the beach and it was close to Sydney and all of those sort of things. So I didn't have to go out into the Wild West and study film and television, which I didn't know if I regretted or not. I still love that. But then that was the degree. It was a Bachelor of Creative Arts in theatre. And then, you do an acting as well in the first year, and then you could specialise in different things. And then there was also the screen production component. So, it was completely up my alley. It was everything that I wanted to do. And by the sea, so I could learn to surf.
Lovely. And it's one of them jobs that, obviously we know there's a stage manager there, but the normal person going to a gig or a show doesn't exactly know what the stage manager does. So what was your day-to-day like?
I love this question. And Brian, it is because if you're doing a bad job, you're going to know who the stage manager is. If you're doing a good job, it's seamless and you're barely seen. Day to day, are you talking in specifics for the Opera House?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had so many shows coming in, so many different shows. So you get the big gigs with all the big famous artists from all around the world. There'd be like plays and different things. There might be some media events going on. There could be launches. It could be corporate stuff. So it was such a mixed bag of different things. And so essentially there was a pool of us that got rostered on specific things, kind of based on our experience in a way. And just the ability to call shows. Some of the shows required you to follow a score and call off a score. Then there were the big rock gigs, which I really loved. That was just kind of my thing, like more so than anything. I think I always gravitated to want to do that, and just with experience and things, like I got rostered on some really cool things. But I mean, a lot of the pre-production was done. So it was kind of like stepping in and then knowing what the writers were for the actual gig, that sort of thing, and then executing it, making sure that things were happening to time, and all of that sort of being in the interface with side of stage and the actual crew, as well as like the visiting artists and all of the people that are associated with it, the companies and various things. So yeah.
Yeah. And when you look back over your whole career, what are the high points? What are the memories you kind of enjoy reliving?
I think, there are so many different stories I could tell you, but what I really loved was just that thing of us getting something up, like to actually have the curtain go up or the lights to go down at 8 o'clock. Like that was the intention. That's what needed to happen. And I loved just driving the stage, meaning not being a stage driver with a whip and getting people to do, but it's that healthy respect of knowing that each person or each role has something very critical and they're good at what they do. So it's kind of like facilitating that to make sure that they're okay and that they're aware with it. If their head's down, like doing a lighting plot or, mucking around with sound and things like that, and something's really quite difficult or a sound check is difficult, making sure that all the parameters are jumped so that everything goes along smoothly. People get breaks, the show is crafted. In some instances, you would have to really shape the show and build cues and do things like that. In other instances, it was kind of like a venue for hire. So a company might come in and they've got it all sort of sorted out as well. So it was just more a case of being there for them in case things go wrong, in case you needed to evacuate, all of those kind of glorious things.
Yeah. Something just popped into my mind. I often ask my guests what is their local music scene like, but I mean from a point of view as what's the gig culture like, from the audience's point of view. Is there lots of festivals? Is it more so just, the gig with the one band coming into Sydney? What is it like?
I could because I told you about my pencil that I used to rewind the tapes in. I'm definitely a girl of the 90s and things. And in those days, life was so much different. You didn't have the mega festivals going on. So you would go and see a band. If you liked a band, you'd go and see it. If a friend liked a band, you'd go in to see it. There was a big culture of doing that. And then in Sydney, of course, before the pandemic, we kind of had lockout laws, which really did kill a lot of the music scene. And that was off the back of a one-punch scenario where a young guy died. And there was just through that, there was a lot of lockdowns. The situation changed. Like we used to have little pubs, I guess, like in London. I don't know what Ireland's like, where you'd have bands playing and there were like terraces and things all around. And that was A-OK. That was the culture. The bands played, Friday, Saturday nights, definitely, maybe midweek. And no one worried about it. It was all good. You chose to buy or rent or live next to a pub. That was good. But now there's just that culture of, people calling up. They have problems with noise, all of that kind of stuff. So a lot of places have closed down. And that was my concern of like, how do young bands cut their teeth? Where are they actually getting that stage experience where they're building a gig or building a following or enjoying just everything that comes with actually doing a live performance? And so, we had the Big Day Out, which is also closed as well. But that was a wonderful thing. There was another one called Home Bake, which was all Australian music, and it was the big lineups of the international bands as well as locals. So we did have that for a very long time. And I think it just started to wind down. Perhaps people weren't wanting the big experience. I think people have changed where there's a lot of algorithms choosing their music via Spotify and they suggest more of the same. And, I think the last big gig I went to was Splendour in the Grass, which is a big festival we have in northern New South Wales. And I was taking the kids by then. So, we're definitely building up the culture of the kids to know that music is really important. It's something to do as well. And they're coming back as well now that COVID is still here, but, the laws have changed. So there's different things that are happening, but I don't see the culture of going to bands anymore as such, with where you've got the drummer and the guitarist and, the keys and the singers and things like that. It does still happen, but it's not how it used to be.
Yeah, yeah. You might have some insights into this side of it then. Over here, it's like when a band gets together and they start getting a bit of a following. In Ireland, anyway, it's like they can only get so far and they have to go to England or further afield to America. Now, Australia is obviously a massive country. Is it sustainable for a band to make it in Australia, or do they look to go to the States and Europe as well?
I think they've just got to go, to be honest. I mean, now we've got social media, we've got different things which have the ability to, I guess, get someone out there. Before you might have needed the machine perhaps to do everything, to tour, to have all the merch, all of that kind of stuff. Now you can do it. And I love bands that schlep it in one big Hi-Ace or one big van, and they go to different places and they organize the gigs and they do their social media, and they, build their albums at home essentially, because the tech's kind of there these days, where you don't have to necessarily go into the studio and have session recorders and recording people and all of that. So it's very different. I think there's definite benefit, but there's also drawbacks as well. And how do you get featured, or how do you get seen if the algorithm once again delivers you more of the same?
Yeah, exactly. It can be one of the best things, but also one of the biggest things to hold you back,
Yeah.
And then, of course, algorithms that don't always go in your favor. I've heard stories of people getting, I can't remember the term, but it's like blacklisted on social media for maybe one or two posts that they didn't get enough interaction on. And then like their next posts for a couple of months won't be shown to anyone,
Yeah, that's it. It sometimes it's only stoked. There's definitely a method you need to do to get in there. What's the best time of day? If you do post, then when do you comment? When do other people comment? Who shares it? It's all of that sort of goodwill stuff that gets you further. But, like that's a completely different role to essentially being a musician or an artist on stage. So
Exactly. And back to the opera house then. I mentioned earlier, it's something that people don't get to see. So what are some things that maybe happened behind the scenes that weren't so great, and how did you overcome them?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of different things. Okay. I think that for me, there was always time. It was all very time and structured. So you'd have a production schedule, how it needed to roll out. If things didn't go to plan, something was late, maybe an amp blew, things needed to be replaced, maybe the band was late, or they chose to come in late. There's so many different things that can make things fall over or stretch away, and your role was to sort of pull things back together. I think if you're looking for some juice on difficult times, maybe,
Right.
Brian, I can give you a funny story. I was quite early in the piece when I was there, and there was this opera diva, and she was doing this show. It was a solo show. I think she had an orchestra. I can't really quite remember, but she was so angry and so just dismissive of everyone that came into her way. And I think she took not a liking to me, but because I was female, she kind of was like, I'm going to see her, and my role is not during the interval to go downstairs and pour her a cup of coffee or something like that. But she didn't want anyone else. So the management were gently massaging Joy, would you mind doing this? And and I'm like, I've got different things. I've got calls to do, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, I agreed. I'll go downstairs to her dressing room. I'll get her a cup of hot water, which is all she wanted. Could have been anyone to give it to her, but it had to be Joy. And I gave it to her, and I'd probably left it shy of about, an inch or two, just so she wouldn't burn herself or scald her mouth, because you know what would have happened then. And I remember walking in, she was like, to the top, to the top. I was so disgusted in the way that she spoke to me. So I was marching back up the corridor to the, the on tap, on demand hot water. I filled it right to the top. I'm like, she's going to burn herself. And then I gave it to her, and it was just horrible. She sang, it happened. And at the end of the show, she came to me and she was so sweet, which just makes you go, people are going through stuff. We don't know what. We don't know how she was feeling about the performance. Maybe it was a lot of stress that she was actually at the opera house. There was a lot writing on it. There was a lot of press, so many things. But how you treat people is everything. And to be a stage manager, how you treat people is everything. I've come across people that are really quite abrupt and domineering and aggressive as stage managers. Bless them, whoever you are, if you're listening. And you don't have to be that way. Like, you can really be kind and generous. You're still direct, you still know what you need to get. But that was a kind of a fun moment in time. It sticks out as a memory because it taught me a lot, that you're going to encounter these people. And I've got a ton of rock and roll stories, but I don't know where you want to go, Brian.
Well, it got me thinking about massive egos that you might have to deal with, and we've all heard them stories of the rock and roll band that pulls into the stadium and they won't go on stage unless they have a bowl filled with like 5,000 yellow M&Ms and, I don't know, some obscure water from, I don't know, Thailand or something. Have you experienced much like that?
Oh, yes, my friend. And I think that they do some really silly writer moments because they want to make sure that people are reading every line. So, that take out all the blue M&Ms or this specific water and can't even access it in Australia. But little things like that, I think they want to make sure, that all technically everything's there. And there is a lot of I have come across bands who have meant to have sound checks and things, and their management and their tech crew are pulling their hair out because they're like, where are they? They're late. It holds everything up. And I think that for me, the best artists or the best bands are people that know what they have to do. It's like if you're an athlete, you get prepared for the game, you do what you need to do, you are ready, and people have paid money to see you. So you want to be have your game face, or do your very best out there. I have seen bands that could be quite lazy, if you will, because they're just running through the motions, and it's hard. It's hard to be on the road visiting city after city after city, and everything looks the same, and you don't actually have enough time to sightsee, and you need those days to recover because you're just exhausted. So I can sort of, I have empathy for people who are a bit rude in a way. But there's definitely that turn of the coin, which is just that ego that can be there. And we're all people. We're all the same. We're all doing the things. I think that sometimes I witnessed a bit of rude from potentially the touring party as well, because they don't care about the venue people, or maybe the venue people have been horrible in previous life forms or different countries who haven't given them what they wanted. So it's that real assessment. Each time you're in somewhere, just be open, be aware. You've got your writer. Hopefully the people know what you want and everything's been prepared for it. Hiccups happen, things happen. Just be graceful to be able, because I'd be often in the firing line, the first person or the person on demand to resolve those situations or those problems. So that's where the art of gently tap dancing around the situation to make things work is good. And for me, it's always about, did the artist leave with the best experience, or did the audience get what they wanted? Were they all happy? Did we go up on time? Was it safe? Did they have absolute fun? Did the artist feel so comfortable that they came on stage and they had the best show ever?
Yeah.
That's what I want. That's what I've always wanted.
Yeah, that's a side of it you don't actually think about either, because you think of going to a concert and it's all about, can the artist give the audience the best experience? But then I suppose it's your job and your team's job to give the artist the best experience as well. That's an interesting take on it now.
Yeah, I mean, it's how you get, I guess, the gold. And I think, for me, I mean, maybe I'm just that type of person. I would, if someone was just vile and they came into a new venue and things like, this is the Opera House, it's a big deal for them. I wanted them to change maybe their perception of what a venue team is, or, what it is to perform, or that they would have a good show, because there's a lot of, I'd seen a lot of the touring party that would be really stressed out based on whether the linchpin, the artist, was going to freak out or not. And I think that's a really difficult and toxic place to be if you're touring for months on end and you're living on a knife's edge because someone might lose their shite. Can I say that in Ireland?
Can indeed.
But yeah, it's a hard thing. It's not easy, doing any of this stuff is not easy because you might be really good at it, so it comes easy, but it physically takes its toll over time, I think. So you want to try and stay as fresh as you can and work with really good people, and hopefully people that are a bit sort of more optimistic. That's a good one as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it is called Concerts That Made Us after all. So I have to ask you, what concerts do you think have made you?
Oh my gosh, this is very hard, Brian, because I was like, there's so many shows that have made me. There's so many shows that have inspired me. I don't know. Do you want a list of people that I've done shows for?
Yeah.
I'll give you a little list, and then if anything jumps out, you can ask me questions about it, because everything has informed me, and I think that that's the beauty of being an artist. You affect change in people. You mean so much to people. People might worship you, or if they're extreme, they're fans. They have a deep respect. You might have shaped or molded them. Your music might have helped them during dark times, all of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot invested in being a fan or being a lover of the music, but there's also a lot that I think the artist has to be grateful for, because if you didn't have the audience or the fans, then you probably don't have a lot. But, Yoko Ono, Bob Dylan, Robert Plant, New Order, Morrissey, Jamiroquai, Coldplay, Keith Urban, Henry Rollins. I've written a couple of things. Engelbert Humperdinck was a hilarious, beautiful show. I don't know if you know him or remember him.
I do.
He's the man before Elvis. I think he gave Elvis the white jumpsuit. I have to say, it was like being in Vegas. Like that took me right back to those kind of like jumpsuit days of Elvis. And it was amazing, because it was so foreign to me. But it was like a time capsule. So that was kind of wonderful. I think Cliff Richard, I did a show with Cliff Richard, and his lighting guy, who was old as the days, did the most incredible lighting.
Really?
And it shocked me. It was a different show, like just the manner in which he lit the stage, with all modern gear and stuff, but it was a different style once again. The way that he brought up the changes in lighting and stuff, like they're the memorable ones because they are different. But yeah, there's been a lot of shows, a lot of people. I can't say, like there's been shows that I've just been a punter, like the Beastie Boys. I was telling you, on Sydney Harbour, that was a great show. Just a bit out of control. We were all falling over fallback wedges and stuff like that at the end of it. I don't know, like that's the beauty of going to. I think I went to Reading Festival in the 90s when I was little, and I think I saw Henry Rollins, and he was abusing the crowd and just doing the Henry stuff that he used to do in those days, Black Flag and everything. And then working with him years later, and he's like some little guru on a microphone telling his tales and things like that. It was kind of full circle. And then for my kids to actually meet him at one of the festivals as well, and they're like, yeah, Mum, whatever. I'm like, this man is a big deal. Like, let's have a photograph with him. I'll take you to the kids club after. And they're like, so they're smiling and things. And Henry was like, these kids, you could just get that sensation. I'm like, oh, Henry loves hugs, everyone. Just give him a hug. And so my kids are like hugging on Henry Rollins, and it was very funny. So
it's funny, when you mentioned him first, I was like, I'm going to ask about him. I was going to ask, like, what was he like? Because he's known for being so grumpy. But I'm glad to hear you say he kind of went full circle.
Yeah, I think so. Like everyone has. And I think maybe that's when you start out as a band. And I can't say, I haven't never had a band. So, you might go, oh, Joy, how can you speak for bands? I think I can, because I've witnessed so much of it. so many people from like really just starting out to the other end where they've been on stage for 50 years, that sort of thing. And it's just fascinating. Refresh the question for me, Brian.
No, I was just saying, I'm glad to hear that you said Henry Rollins went full circle, from his Black Flag days back to, as you said, being like a guru on stage, telling his stories.
I think it's evolution, like when we want the band or the artist to play the same thing and they release a new album and we're like, oh, but we just want them to play the original, play your old stuff. We don't want any of the new stuff. But I think that's evolution. You have to evolve where you're just bored and you die.
Yeah, exactly. And something I'm dying to ask is, when you go to a gig as a punter, how do you switch off? Are you standing in the crowd going, I do that different and I can see what they're doing there? Or do you just totally shut it out and you're just there as the punter?
Like, I'll notice it. And, I think it's that thing of not being critical with how other people do things. There can be errors and, I might see if a light's out or something, or they could have cued that better, or, the band really should have come on at this specific time on this applause, or they could have taken another bow, or, all of that kind of stuff is there. But I think for me, it's just going and purely being. And I mean, that's maybe the strange female in me. Like I'm more than happy or comfortable to buy one ticket. I don't have to go with people. And in fact, I actually like going to things by myself because I don't get everyone, oh, what did you think of this? And like I go for the performance. And I can't remember who I have seen recently that was just with me, but it's just I can switch off pretty easily because I'm looking at what the artist is doing. I think that's for me more important now. How they work the stage, if they talk to the audience, what stories are they telling? Are they crafting it actually into a show where they introduce all the band members at one point, all of those sort of things? Or is it just clunky? They've got a set list and they just do whatever they do, which can work as well,
Yeah. True. And that's a nice segue, actually. My next question I was going to ask is, I often speak to my guests about how important it is to build a relationship with the audience, and work on their stagecraft. What's your experience with that side of the performance?
I think that's kind of the key. Like, that's what gives you the X factor. If you're into the X factor, what gives you that synergy with having your lyrics, your music given to, offered to an audience, and for the audience to take it. So if you're well established, like say for Bob Dylan, he didn't talk to the audience once, like didn't say hi or good evening or this is my next song or thank you very much, like none of that. He just played and they adored him. So there's that. But then there's also, it's lovely when people kind of share their stories. I've just come from blah, 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 and this happened. And, sometimes people have built-in jokes or, they say the same thing pretty much every night. If it's a repeat show, but it gets the laughs, it gets the engagement of the audience. So it's kind of up to you how you feel. But I think, artists really need listeners. And that is a beautiful thing when you can engage. Like, I think for me, I had the privilege of, you've got the band on one side on the stage, you've got the audience, a sea of people on the other side. And I was like right in this very middle side of stage where I could see both. So I could see really closely the band member or the artist performing, but then I could see the faces in the first couple of rows. And, when they're singing back at the person on stage, or they're adoring them, or they're smiling, or they're happy, and they've parted with $500 worth of ticket, whatever it may be. But when you see them in the rain, I'd be on stage, we're doing an outdoor massive gig, and you'd see these punters that were in their little not umbrellas because they weren't allowed to have umbrellas, but their ponchos, drenched like sewer rats, waiting because the gates had opened and the show wasn't on, or even the band, even the support wasn't on for the next 3-4 hours, but they're committed and they're up at the rails just waiting there. They're the special kind of ones. They're the ones you give the set list to at the end of the night, because they've put in the hard yards.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And with so many people working on a production, then what's the backstage culture like?
Oh, hard to say. Like when you say culture, I think um, everyone's respectful. I think for all the artists that I have worked with, I never asked for a photograph. I never chit chatted to them unless they were really chit chatty. You know, if they approached and wanted to have a big talk about stuff, happy to talk. If they were just head in the game, it'd be a greeting and then off you go. Um, Tell them what they need, or get what they need, talk to them about specifics of the stage or the show, and then leave them alone. So I think people are very respectful. I think I would sometimes be put in situations where people wanted me to sign CDs or sign something of for them, and I just would refuse unless they were open to it and they were relaxed and calm, because at the end of the day it's about protecting the artist from any extra silly business that doesn't need to happen, because I always thought, they're the ones that are working the stage. People are here to see them. Let them have their peace, let them have their quiet, let them have their calm, and then move on from there. So I think very respectful. In terms of my crew, they always would be respectful. And if they weren't quite respectful, then maybe Joy might say something a little bit to them, just to amp them up or make them feel better. Because there were instances where I'd come in and generally the stage manager might start later in the day, but, the sound or the lighting or the tech crews were there earlier to bump in and do all that kind of stuff. And you'd come in and sometimes the production manager would come up and go, "Oh, we're broken." I'm broken because people are horrible. And you don't want that. So I'd turn up and then, Joy would be on stage and do, and maybe it's the only female that they've seen the whole day. And so, that's been an interesting ride as well. Sometimes you would turn up and they'd be like, "Oh, who's this woman? Who's this chick? What's it about?" So there was like, until they knew you within about the first 5 minutes, then they'd be like, "Oh, okay, she's cool. It's okay. We can go with that." But all of that silly stuff doesn't need to happen, like I think that if we reframe it, how we approach being on stage, it is a privilege. It's a wonderful opportunity for people to be seen if they're less known. They can certainly amplify with all their socials and things like that. But, I sometimes think like I'm a bit of a stage mum as well, where I go, I hope young bands aren't only invested in drinking the riders and stuff. Because if you want to have a long career, and I have seen that backstage culture, for us to wind down, everyone goes for a drink in the green room or, at the pub and things like that, which is normal. But equally so, like if you're having a bevy every single night before bedtime and things, as well as bands, like I think people might think they've made it if they get a full bottle of scotch and, whatever on the rider.
Yeah.
And it's like, it becomes lolly water, and it's too much for the body. Like you're pummeling yourself every night you're performing. You've got late nights. You might be touring internationally, all of those. Your body clock's already screwed up as it is. So all of those kind of things can consolidate to a difficult circumstances for people's well-being. So that was always kind of important for me, like to make sure that everyone was okay. And, people go through stuff as we all do. We're all human. But I think it can be kind of a little bit toxic sometimes. And it's about looking after yourself. And, for me, certainly it was always looking after the crew, making sure that they were up-tempo, happy, fed, watered, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. From talking to so many bands, especially young bands nowadays, at first I was shocked to hear that they don't really party like you would imagine, Now I know they're not going to be willing to just share all their dirty laundry about partying, but there's a lot more people that are, more conscious of taking care of their body and not overdoing it when it comes to partying. And, a lot of them say after the gig, "Oh, we'll just go get a bite to eat, have a walk around, and then go to bed and on to the next city then." So it's interesting to see that part of the rock starry kind of thing is dying out, I suppose you'd say.
I think so, because you're physically not, you won't be invited back, I think, if you've had, I can't say that I was ever around where someone completely trashed a dressing room or anything like that, but I do remember someone who, whatever they did after the post show, and they like totaled their car, but it wasn't their car, it was the company car, and just silly things like that. And you go, you've put yourself in danger, you've wrecked a car, you've you're in the press now, all of those kind of things. So there are ramifications for what you do. And it takes a bit to wind down after a show as well. So put on that meditation music, get under your covers, be grateful for the gig that you had, and just reset for the next day.
Exactly. And you've stepped away from that world now and into the digital world. What kind of led to that decision? Because I'm sure at times you felt like you had the best job in the world.
Oh, many times. I absolutely loved that role. Like, to have the best people, the best kind of bands coming in. And it was such a mixed bag of everyone that I got to witness, like I couldn't have asked for anything more. I think it came to Robert Plant. And, when you're hearing Stairway to Heaven side of stage and you're kind of like, this is so great. I've heard it, he's playing it. But what else is there? What more? And I think for me it was kind of like that, just a bit of no growth, if you will. Like, I'd seen and done everything, but a gig's a gig at the end of the day. Like, it's very, maybe people come in, the band comes in at sometimes like 4 to 6, maybe they might have something, then there's a bit of dinner and the show goes up at 8. It's all formulaic in many ways. So I think that what I wanted was a bit more challenge, and through wanting to kind of produce my own stuff, I actually did more outside of the house, which was beautiful. Like, it was a lovely place to work. There were issues in terms of, working too much, or, there was a lot asked of you, a lot of, I guess, stress that you just took it as normal. But hyper level, I think, depending on what it was. And they had so many personalities to deal with. But I think for me, it was just that I wanted growth. And by doing more, I kind of was just exhausting myself, because there were so many different opportunities that I didn't get to get, like I was realizing the band's or the artist's journey. I was realizing their work, putting their things on. So when it was, the little seed was planted, maybe I'll just do something else, or maybe I'll get out. What would I do? And, I always say that if you were a potter, you'd have pots. Or if you're a painter, you'd have paintings. If you were an artist, then you'd have an album or something like that, to sort of show that legacy work of all the things that you've done. But as a stage manager, what do you have? Like, physically, I could show a picture of this or a clip on YouTube of this, but what does that mean? Like, people don't even know what a stage manager does half the time. So I think for me, it was like, I love listening to stories. I love hearing about the experience of other people. I love bands and I love music and creativity. So I thought I might start a podcast. Like, it was something that was really kind of keen to me. And I also was, dabbling in, maybe I'll develop a product and then I'll sell it and things. But that was sort of like all the entrepreneurial side of things. And I was like, what is an entrepreneur? What exactly do they do? And so I sort of went down this rabbit hole of what that was. And I thought I need a mentor. And it just so happened that I fell into being mentored by Randy Zuckerberg and 2 people that she was working with. And so that was a beautiful thing to be able to learn through her what she did. And, she had all the experience with Facebook and all of that. So just thinking in different ways, it's a very different way of thinking to a very quite linear way of producing or putting on shows. So I was just really keen at just mixing it up and really learning new things. So that's kind of where the podcast started. And I've been able to have experts and, thought leaders and people, just very different to me that have been able to, I guess, develop something, make something. They have short stories to share. I like the nerdiness of it. So it's called Nerds of Joy. And, it's me. And to nerd to me is just to be who you are, like being really passionate about whatever it is. So you could be a rock nerd, really into rock, and knowing everything about it. You might, you've got your drivers as to why you have a podcast too, Brian, but that was kind of what it was, and just building on that brand of Nerds of Joy. So it's just what I want for people is just to really live their best life. It sounds a bit coachy and weird, but meaning that I just want people to get out and do what they want to do. Because I think for me, as much as I love the stage, I was very tethered in a way to doing what I already knew. And I was seduced by all of the beautiful artists and things because I love music and all different types of music. You can ask me, what do you like? And I can list all these disparate genres because, I was exposed to so much, from classical to rock to everything, Britpop, whatever, techno, everything. But yeah, I think I've probably gone in a very big circle to you, Brian.
No,
that's
good.
the podcast. I love it. And I love helping people build their podcasts as well. And to me, it's that same thing. Like, it's a synergy. I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. How are we connecting? Are people finding value in what we're actually saying? Like, that's the important thing, because I think on a lot of podcasts, people just come and they just talk like they're talking every day. And I think unless you're a celebrity, who cares? And even so, like some of the celebrities as well. I was having a chat with a prolific podcaster that's been in the industry since like 2004, and we're like, yeah, those celebrity podcasts, like, who cares? They're really actually, when you get to know them or when they're speaking their truth, you just want them to kind of just be on television or on the big screen playing the character. So it's very fascinating how we connect and how we engage an audience. And that's not unlike what I've been doing, with people on stage. How do I help the audience be connected with the artist? How does the artist get produced so they give the very best? And that's kind of what I'm doing with people now, with their own podcasts and, setting up shows, live shows and things.
When it comes to Nerds of Joy, how do you decide on a guest? What makes a guest kind of stick out and you go, oh, I think I'd like to have a chat with them?
Yes, this is hard. I mean, actually, I was thinking about this today, Brian, because so many people do reach out. Like, some people just come into your inbox, and then there are others that have got obviously people that push them and somehow get your email. And then, there are the different platforms that we know of where we have connected as well. So I think the last time I logged on to one of those specific sites, it was 80 people or so. And I hadn't checked it for a couple of weeks. And I just thought, gosh, it's really hard because so many people want to be on podcasts because they're launching a book or they're doing this or they're doing that. But at the end of the day, if they don't have the skill to be able to talk and it's just a pitch, then to me, that's boring. And some people might go, oh, that's great. Or, find someone who's like-minded that's doing the same thing. But to me, that's boring. And I think that's because, like, I've worked on TEDs and I've worked on big festivals where it's all talk circuits, and I've shoved Brene Brown on stage or Elizabeth Gilbert, whoever, Martin Seligman. So there's been a lot of people where I've seen these thought leaders as such talking. And sometimes I'd implant and extend on what they were talking about. If we were doing more than a couple of days, I'd be like, oh, that was so interesting about that. And one of them might be like, oh, well, I might push that a little bit more next time we're talking. So I think I've always seen what sort of the best conversations can be. But to me, it's not all the accolades. It's not all of the amazing stuff I might have done or the people that I've worked with or witnessed. It's kind of like the messy stuff as well, like, where things fall down. That's really important to find guests who will disclose, not everything. We don't have to put out our dirty laundry on a podcast episode or on social media, but I think it's just that realism. I want people to be quite real if they're on the podcast. I want them to be able to share. Like, we all go through different things, but it's certainly not a sob fest either. So it's such a delicate balance, I think. But one thing I do is, like, if you reached out to me, I would be like, okay, let me find Brian online. Let me see what he's done. Okay, and it's not a judgment thing, but it's just the finding out whether you can talk. Because I've had people with less experience, if you will, come on the podcast, and that's been okay. Like, I might have had to bridge it in a different way where they just do a segment and then I have a greater theme of what I'm talking about in it. Or are they able to carry the whole podcast? So it's all of these little things I think a lot of new podcasters don't think about.
Yeah, exactly. And especially interview podcasts, because it can be very tricky sometimes to lead the conversation, especially if you're asking questions and you're getting absolutely nothing back. If you have someone, like you said, that doesn't have much experience, and it's like trying to get blood from a stone to get answers from them, and it's near impossible to make a good episode out of it.
I'm feeling your pain. It's happened to you, hasn't it?
Just a
And
bit.
but you know what the funny thing is, Brian? Like I still do gigs now and again if people call up and I really, I like the people and stuff like that. I might do things, but it's I guess making that decision, who do you want to work with or who do you want to work for? And it's the same thing with like finding those podcast guests. Like, do you want to? I mean, it's a lot of work. I'm really grateful that you've been like, Joy, come on the podcast, because I know what it takes to do this. I also know like the whole editing side, then if you do promos and all of that, like a really good, well put together podcast, especially if you're writing notes and doing all of the descriptors, could take up to 10 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's the reality. And then I don't know if you're doing vision or video and stuff as well. So for people just wanting to come on your podcast and not delivering the goods, I think you have to curate ferociously on who's coming in. I get a lot of, and no, beautiful people that have they lead with their story or they lead with their trauma. And for me, we do all have traumatic things that may have happened. Sometimes, that's their cell. And so I sort of try to not have that, because I think that I want to leave the listener with something more. I want the listener to feel empowered or excited or interested, or maybe have their mind shifted with the conversations that I have. And I think it comes with experience. And I didn't go on I was just saying that I didn't go on many podcasts, and I haven't, because I had to develop my voice as well. Like I was the silent person in black side of stage that you never saw, unless there was like some major showstop or something like that. You wouldn't see me. You didn't know, and you weren't meant to know. So it took a while for me to go, oh, hang on, Joy, you speak, you prompt these people on what they could speak about, or you help them in every way, shape or form. Help yourself, like develop your voice, feel comfortable in your skin, to know what to say. And that's why like this is a beautiful podcast to be on, because I've never talked about the Opera House. I've never talked about artists and things like this before. But I think it's time now. There's enough sort of space between what I did on the main stages to now. And I think if it helps people, if it helps bands or listeners, I'm happy to share.
Yeah. Well, I know my listeners are going to absolutely love this episode, because like I said at the start, it's the side of it we never hear about on my show. It's all about the performance usually, so they'll be intrigued by it. And before we dive into the last couple of questions, then, what are your future plans when it comes to your podcast?
Oh, look, it would be really lovely if some, independently wealthy person picked up and, sponsored me for millions of dollars, that I could rival Joe Rogan and all those people. I think that's probably it. I want to continue to have more conversations with people and do things my way, definitely. Like I'm able to now be a master of my own time, whereas before I was dictated 100% by what was going on stage. That was just the nature of the beast. And so now I can craft and formulate things my own way. So I'm super happy to do that. I I've been toying with more programs and things like that. And, having people come as a team, I think that's what I've missed in a way, like from leaving stage, because I was so used to gathering, it could be 5 people, 10 people, 500 people all in one stream and pushing them out like a sausage factory where everyone's happy and joyous and we get to the end goal and we get the show happening, and it's almost perfection. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it's 99.9% there and the audience leaves happy. And so to do that, I would love to just get a whole group of people together. So whether it be like, okay, we all want to start podcasts. So there's hoops you need to jump through to physically and mechanically build a podcast, but it's all of this juicy goodness that people don't know about. And I just don't want people to be bored. I don't want people wasting their time. Like for my podcast, I don't want people to waste their time. So I'm always going to try and make it next level, have really good speakers and, people that come on the show as well. Like sometimes they're not so seasoned. You think that they are. Everything reads that way, whether they're typing into ChatGPT and getting something spat out, which sounds beautiful, and then you actually meet them and there's like they're kind of dead inside.
Yeah.
That's a hard one. You might have had that, Brian, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, do you abandon the conversation, or do you keep going because then you feel like a bad person because you're like, I'm not going to get you on my podcast. Like it's hard. It is hard. I've had a few salesy people as well try almost slip through and it's just like, I'm sorry, I don't really think that there's a synergy here. I wish you all the best and stuff. And they can take it really poorly. But at the end of the day, you're the one investing your time and energy to create your podcast. It's your call.
Exactly. Some of the unusual ones I've had is people reaching out or PR firms reaching out to have somebody on that has absolutely nothing to do with music. I remember, I think there was someone that was a chef and had wrote a cookbook, wanted to come on my show before. This was back when I started the show. And, what would a chef have to offer to a music interview podcast?
Mm-hmm. Unless they're a rock and roll chef and they can tell stories about what happened and what they cook for you two or whatever. Like that's right. I've had it as well, but I think that that's just lazy PR, and it's management generally overseas. They don't understand. They're not, they have a body of what they want to say. And then they might be like, Brian, I've listened to your episode, and then insert any episode. And I really like what you're doing. And it's like, then I go into something or somebody's bio who's completely irrelevant to my audience and look forward to hearing from you. But then there's also the lazy people that reach out and they're like, yo, I'm keen to be on your podcast. It's like, well, would you like me to spend the next 16 minutes falling down a rabbit hole to find out who you are when you've given me no information? So, yeah, it's just a vetting process, I think. It's quite natural that we have to do that. And it's kind of funny. For me, I didn't like to talk about myself, what I did or my achievements and anything. So that's definitely been an evolution. I think that's what podcasting over time can give you. If you are someone who's not quite confident being seen, you can use a voice. But at the other end of the day, it's kind of sink or swim. Like if you don't have a synergy, if you can't hold an audience, if you don't have anything interesting to say, then people are going to zone out because we don't have the attention spans. Although if you grab them and people like you, then you've got them for 50 minutes, an hour and a half even.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose we better dive into the last couple of questions. So everybody gets these now, I'm afraid, so you can't get off the show till you answer.
Oh, okay. Am I scared? Is there something to be frightened about, everyone?
I don't know. There could be an odd question in here. All right.
Oh, throw it at me.
We'll start you off easy. If you could see any performer from history in concert for one night only, who would it be?
Oh gosh, there's a lot. There's a lot, Brian. But I'm going to go with Bowie. Definitely David Bowie. I've seen a show that was put together and it was done really well. There was just that sensation of him in the room. But I definitely would love to see him just over all his different machinations, how he put things together, the ideas that he had, what he thought of was an artist and things, and how he was always changing and disrupting and recycling and things. Like it kind of fascinates me.
Yeah. He's always on the top of people's lists as well. He's a great one. And the next one, so this is the odd one I was telling you about.
Okay.
You had to spend 24 hours locked in a room with any musician from history. Who would it be?
I had to I'm so glad you sent me that question beforehand, because I was like, I'd be sitting here for like 10 minutes and you'd have to edit me out with just silence. I now say, and I wasn't a super Beatles fan or anything like that, but I want to know more about John Lennon, and purely because I did do a show with Yoko, and that was amazing to just be with her. I was sitting on the floor. She was in a little chair, and I was like notating all of these things about what it was. And we had like a video package of the original Imagine on a massive screen, and we played it, and she talked about John and things, and I actually got the chills. Like, I felt like a sensation of him standing there, and she was saying that she gets that feeling, she knows he's with her, and I'm not like superstitious kind of person, but I really got this sensation of someone quite tall next to me. But I think John, because I learnt so much in working with her, and I want to know more about not his music as such, but just that premise of being an artist and things and their relationship. I learnt a lot watching the Imagine from the very beginning to the end, like in extended play. So that would be it, John Lennon, even though I'm not a super Beatles fan.
Right. He's another good one. Be tricky though. When people say him to me, I often say it could be tricky because he was a very complicated person as well, and if it's just you and him in a room, you don't know how it's going to go.
Well, that's the beauty, and that's the puzzle. I think that's, from your experience of interviewing lots of people and with mine, is that we're pulling apart these stories and the complexity, and then still being able to not get them upset or piss them off, that we've asked dumb questions or questions that could make them upset, so it's always that fine balance. And that's the big thing about trust, trust for artists, to be able to trust you, to know that you're doing things, as well as like, podcast guests, to trust, you place your trust in someone that they're going to give you beautiful questions where you can build that synergy, or is it going to be disintegrate into something kind of yuck, and then it's edited really horribly, and then it goes out and you're like, oh, I said that, but I didn't mean that. So trust is everything.
Exactly. And the final one, so what song would appear on the soundtrack to your life?
Well, can I have a couple?
Yeah, of course. It's your life.
Thank you so much, Brian. I can't, I've gone from classical to this to that to everything, and everything in between. So I can't say. I definitely have to have like Blur, like Song 2 or something would be there, and maybe Pictures of You by The Cure, or I don't know. Some sort of like techno would be in there as well, but then there'd be something classical and symphonic, but then there'd be also some jazz, like from the 30s or 40s. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, I have to say.
Sounds like a good one though. And I think realistically, when you look at that question, the soundtrack to your life, for everybody, it would be a mixed bag. It's not going to be just like, oh, I'm a metalhead, it's going to be filled with metal. You go to the biggest metalhead or rock guy in the world, and you will find, like, I don't know, a Britney Spears song on their soundtrack somewhere,
Absolutely. And you know what? That's how it should be. Like, I hope that your listeners aren't there going, I'm just one genre and I'm only one artist, and that I will die by that, because music is so rich, and I think we need to really garner and harness all of these different influences and things, and put on different tracks, and seek out your friends who are listening to something different, or someone on the other side of the world, or throw it out to a Facebook group, all of that, just to find new artists and things, because the algorithm may not be delivering you the gold. So yeah, go back and check out the 80s, check out the 60s, 50s, 40s. Go back to Elizabethan times and see what you can find in chamber music. Just expand your repertoire.
Exactly. Listen, Joy, I have to say, I can't describe how much I've enjoyed chatting to you now, and I'm so glad that you reached out. It has been one hell of an episode. Thanks a million.
Oh, thank you so much. Love to everyone in Ireland, and it's just been a delight to be here with you, Brian.
Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. And if you're interested in signing up to Band Builder Academy, use the link in the show notes below and enter the code CONCERTS and you'll receive 10% off. So, until next time, keep rocking.
Hey, what are you guys still doing here? The show's over. It's over. You can go home. Go on. We'll see you next time. We'll be here. Bye.